The fortress is real. You know which one I mean. The particular arrangement of things you've built around yourself that makes it feel like if everything holds, you'll be okay. A career in the right shape. A relationship that confirms something. You've been maintaining it for a long time, and some part of you already knows it will need to be maintained again tomorrow. Chinmayananda wrote something I keep returning to. Each time, something in me that thought it had already understood goes quiet again. I'm not going to offer answers. I'm going to sit with what Chinmayananda pointed at and follow it as far as it goes. Some of what's here I haven't fully resolved myself. There's a texture to the fortress building that doesn't get named very often. It isn't primarily ambition or greed. Underneath whatever solid thing you've been reaching for, there's something that feels more like urgency, a low-level pressure that says, this needs to be handled. This needs to be arranged. Get this right, and the feeling underneath will finally settle. The feeling underneath is a particular kind of loneliness, not the loneliness of being without people, something older and quieter, the loneliness of being a self that feels fundamentally separate, cut off, looking out at everything through a gap that can't quite be closed, no matter how much is accumulated on either side of it. You've probably been aware of that feeling longer than you've been aware of almost anything else. It may have been the first thing you ever tried to solve. The fortress was the solution. It just never quite solved it. Chinmayananda points at why. He writes, from a manual of self-unfoldment, the ego feels alone, and in its loneliness, it is overwhelmed by fear. To try to ensure its own security, it builds powerful fortresses around itself, such as wealth, fame, and pleasures. But even if it can get all its desires, the ego will continue to be insecure, frightened, lonely, and unhappy. That last line, even if it can get all its desires, he's pointing somewhere prior to what is wanted, prior to the quality of the desire, prior to what is being reached for. He's pointing at the structure of the one who wants. The ego that builds and achieves and accumulates and finally arrives at everything it was reaching for is still the ego, still alone, still frightened. The loneliness was there before the first fortress wall went up, before the shape of the desire had even formed. The fortress was never going to solve the loneliness because the fortress was built by the loneliness. The building was the loneliness, given something to do. And now Chinmayananda shifts the investigation entirely. He doesn't ask what the ego should want instead. He asks something that changes the direction of the whole problem. What if the self that feels cut off, alone, frightened, is not what you actually are? He answers with an image. It needs to be followed slowly. From the same text, when you are interested in a film, you forget that they are only images on a screen. If you see the film, you do not remember the immaculate screen behind the images. If you remember the screen, you cease to perceive the images, the continuous flow of events. If you see the screen, you do not see the images. And if you see the images, you do not see the screen. The character in the film is always separate from other characters, always subject to what the story does next. The only move available to a character is to arrange the circumstances into a safer shape. But the circumstances can always shift. The screen was never inside the film. It was never a character at risk. No position in the story that could be threatened. Everything appears in it, and nothing that appears in it changes it. This is what Chinmayananda calls the Atman, the unchanging substrate underneath every experience, every mood, every version of you that has come and gone, the ground that was never not there. And something in you recognizes this when you hear it. That recognition is real. Something in you knows this is true before you've finished thinking about it. Here's where I want to stay for a moment, though. The recognition is real, and the loneliness is still there in the morning. The particular tightening in the chest. The loop that picks up again before you've made any decisions. The ego and its fortress, still at work, still reaching for whatever solid thing is next on the list. Understanding the teaching didn't seem to change the one who understood it. There's an assumption hidden in how the teaching gets received that Chinmayananda points at quietly, almost between the lines. The assumption is this, that understanding the distinction between screen and film is the same as being the screen. You heard it, something recognized it, and from that recognition, something concluded so naturally that it never felt like a conclusion. Now I know what I am, and when I lose touch with that knowing, I can return to it. I can practice returning to it. I can get better at it, but the screen doesn't return to itself. It has no position to return from. It isn't a state you enter through correct understanding or sustained practice or the right quality of attention. The moment the teaching became something the practitioner could use, a position to recover, a perspective to maintain under pressure, the screen became, very quietly, a destination, something slightly ahead. The character in the film, now trying to remember that he is not inside the film. Chinmayananda writes, "The ignorance about the self as Turayam, the fourth, unlimited state, is the cause of our slavery. The mistake is the misunderstanding, taking oneself as limited. It's a case of mistaken identity, so thorough that the identity itself became the one doing the searching. The character can't step out of the film by trying harder to remember the screen. The trying is more content on the screen. The sincere spiritual effort is more content on the screen. The practitioner sitting very quietly, working carefully to disidentify from thought, attempting to maintain the position of the witness. That is also a movement, appearing in something that has never moved. The screen doesn't require the character to be less active, or more sincere, or more surrendered before it can be recognized. It is already fully present. Through the whole search, through every fortress and every collapse, through every meditation and every morning, when the loneliness came back unchanged. Nothing that has played across it has ever altered it. What is actually doing the looking when you search for the screen? If you follow that back honestly, past the practice, past the understanding, past the years of reaching, something gets very quiet, something that was quiet before any of it began. And if that's true, if what you've been looking for was never not here, then the fortress, the loneliness, the search, the ego and all its reaching, all of it has been happening inside something that was never lonely, never frightened, never in need of a fortress. The character was looking for the screen, and the looking was always already on it. There is another video on this channel that may sit alongside what opened here, but only go there if something feels unresolved. Before you go anywhere, one question, the one who recognized the teaching, who understood the screen and the film, who has been working sincerely to remember what he is, and who still wakes up some mornings into the same familiar loneliness that was there before the search began. Who is that?